Roth, oltre a essere uno dei più noti robotici mondiali, ha una doppia vita, nel senso che ha sempre accompagnato la sua esperienza nel settore della meccanica, della cinematica e dei robot al design thinking, ed è stato il cofondatore...
Come lo definiresti il design thinking per mia mamma che ci sta ascoltando e magari non lo sa?
Ma il fatto di pensare a realizzare qualcosa in una maniera, diciamo, completa, guardando tutti quanti gli aspetti.
Quindi... Diamogli il benvenuto, tocca a te.
Sì.
Siete amici, immagino.
Sì. Io spero di vedere Bernie che...
Professor Roth, welcome to the Rome Maker Faire. Can you hear us?
Glad to be here.
Ciao Bernie.
Yeah. So I'm glad to be here. Shall I, if I start my talk, I need to share my screen with you. Shall I do that?
Okay, yes, you can. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm ready, and I'm going to start my timer. So we're in business now. So I want to talk to you this afternoon for you, this morning for me, about designing and making based on user needs. And this is something that's very important to us at the D.school, where I work mainly now. And if you're going to solve a problem, basically there are for us, two very important aspects to it. One is observation, the other is empathy. Observation means to just get an insightful immersion into the circumstances around the object of study. That's sort of clear. Empathy is a little more subtle. And for us, empathy is a very deep thing. It turns the observer from a dispassionate bystander into one who sees the need on a personal level, thereby connecting to the problem on a human rather than only a technocratic level. And that's something I want to explain to you in a little detail. Because when you have empathy, who do you have empathy for? Well, basically you think of the user, but there are really different categories of users. So for example, it could be the designer, the technocrat who designs whatever it is you have. It could be an expert user who knows how to use it at a high level, or it could be the consumer. And the consumer for us is the same as the user. And now I'm going to show you this. I was in a lab in Japan, and the three examples were so clear. The first is the enthusiastic designer. A student designed this machine. It had to do with demining and locating and getting rid of mines, landmines. And this is a very sophisticated machine, and it's kind of complicated, and it's worth a few doctoral theses and all that. And it's a great machine. But, can the person out in Afghanistan really use it? Then you get a second level, which is sort of the master's level. This is a great master's thesis, and the student who's done it is a big expert at manipulating this very complicated mechanism. It's a wonderful technical thing, and if he's an expert, he could make his whole life on using this device. But really, again, it's maybe a little too complicated. And then we get to really what to me is the consumer-based product. It's simply a shield. It's a little hard to see, but there's a plastic shield here, and it's a shovel. And this is an undergrad project, right? So in my hierarchy, academically, I went from the best to the worst. But really, in a customer's hierarchy, this is the best one that I'm showing you right now. So it's important to understand that idea. And what we do is we're dealing with people who don't have a lot of money. And I want to talk to you about we give about 40 courses a year in the D.school, and they're all design-based. But there's one that's especially designed for people at the bottom of the economic pyramid, and it's called Design for Extreme Affordability. Now, we've done 158 consumer-centered projects in 17 years with 63 partners in 32 countries. And we believe we've touched the lives of over 100 million people with just what's come out of that course. So I'm going to just show you two examples and to give you an idea of what I think are really important values to have when you go about designing and making things. So the examples are, one is dealing with prosthetics and the other is dealing with dirt floors of all things. So with prosthetics, it's an interesting example because here's a prosthetic. If you're interested in beauty, that's a beautiful prosthetic. If you're interested in confidence, that's a beautiful prosthetic. If you're interested in mobility, that's another beautiful. So there are a lot of prosthetics out there that are kind of wonderful. The problem is they're very expensive and they're tailor-made for people who don't have options. And if you don't have options, you can get along without it. You can play soccer with one leg, especially if you're in Naples or Rome or something like that. But basically, if you go to somewhere like India, there's a huge number of people with above knee amputations. And the question was, can we do something to help them? So we went to Jaipur in India and we looked for the need. And these are the people there. Now, the secret is one of these people is a Stanford student. You may or may not know which one it is, but that's Joel there. And he and his friend were able to hang around there. They met this Kumar, and they became good friends with Kumar, who has missing a leg. And they kind of found out his specific needs and his specific desires. And he had a leg, and you could see he was working. Now, this is just a simple hinge there. And if you notice how he's walking, there's a lot to be desired on that. So they noticed that, and they figured out what? Well, he just has a single axis in the joint there, and that's a problem. It's unstable, it's psychologically draining, and it's also a long learning curve to use that. So they decided that Kamal, which is the fellow, he needs a way to live at his full potential. And he doesn't have it with that prosthetic that he now belongs. So they went about to find something else. So it's well known in prosthetic business that you have to have the center of rotation above the joint if you're going to be stable. And in this picture, which is from a textbook on walking, the black dot represents the center of rotation instantaneously of the joint of the lower limb to the upper part of the leg. And so you have to be able to make a joint which does that, keeps the center that way. And to do that, it has to be polycentric, and the simple solution is a 4-bar mechanism. So this is a prototype of a 4-bar mechanism made out of cardboard, which they designed and tested. And they came up with a knee, which is called the first Jaipur knee, and it's polycentric. It's polymer based, so it's very inexpensive. And when it was first made, which was some years ago, it cost $20. And this is how he looked now. So that's a huge improvement. But in addition to that, it enabled a lot of things in his life. And the Time magazine gave it as one of the 50 best inventions of the year. I don't know if it's merit, it's a 4-bar linkage, but that's the idea, okay? So that, just by specifically dealing with the one user and dealing his things, they were able to do something that was very appropriate to the person at the level of the user or the consumer. Another example has to do with dirt floors. We got a problem for Rwanda, where homeowners, the floors, mainly people use dirt floors, and that's a problem because you have a lot of disease and a lot of health issues because of that. So what they found, if they could make the floors that are still using the dirt but are tamped down, you can get away with a lot of health, and it actually looks quite nice also. So here's someone making one of these kind of floors. And the way it works is there are several levels. There's a gravel level, there's a coarse earth level, there's a fine earth level, and then there's a natural sealant on top. And we were able to get all those materials locally and even figure out how to make a sealant that really works. And a company was started by one of our companies called Earth Enable, and these floors were affordable, they were locally sourced, they were environmentally sustainable, they were job creating, everything was good, except there was one problem, and that is this tamping device, which you see next to the wheelbarrow up above. It's a compactor, and it's the key to getting the floor down. And it's 60 pounds of weight, and it can only be used by strong men, really. So you got a bunch of guys who can use it, and they can get a good income from it. But A, it brings the cost way up, and B, they're not around for most of the season when they're farming. They're all farming. So the problem is, how can you do it in a do-it-yourself thing? How can you do the floor for do-it-yourself thing? So the goal was to enable anyone to compact their floor within one day, and you had to balance time. You had to balance timing versus the weight and costs like that. And again, the students came up with something called the Tamping Queen. You'll see why the name in a minute. And it's essentially a simple 6-bar linkage, which you can run with your hand, but it's much better if you use your legs because your legs are much stronger. And that can do the tamping for you. And it does successful compaction. And it's 15 kilograms lighter than the other thing. It's similar time to do it. It applies greater pressure. You're using the strongest muscles. It's consistent, and it's even transportable by bicycle. So it's a big win. And that's the team, so that's why it's called the Queen. But at any rate, that's sort of the kind of things we do. And then last year, we, as you all noticed, the world got COVID-19. And we had our usual number of 10 projects out in the world. And in March, our students, the projects last from January to June. And in March, the students always go out in the world to talk to their clients and users. And we couldn't leave Stanford. It was against the rules to leave Stanford. So what happened? Well, it turns out instead of being a catastrophe, it was sort of a gift in that people were able to improvise and make prototypes at home. So, an example, this is, I cannot show you this because it's being in Rome. This is a pasta cutter, not a pizza cutter. So this guy at home made himself a little prototype, took his pizza cutter, heated it up. So he wasn't allowed into the shop, so he had to just do what he could do from home. Took two pieces from a garbage bag and cut them to size with the heated cutter. So while he's cutting them, they're actually sealing the edges. So he's actually, at the same time he's cutting it to the size, he's making a bag out of this thing. We'll do to the heated pizza cutter. And the uses for, this is a project in Uganda. They're reforesting a lot of the farmlands, having small farmers planting hundreds of thousands of trees. And this bag is he's going to put some of the fertilizer in, and the seeds are up above, and he's going to do it. So that's a simple prototype that would have never happened if we hadn't had the virus, for example. What are we going to do this year? This year we decided we're going to do all our projects locally. So we've gone into the community, and we've chose 8 projects out of 30 that people offered us to do things like community service, homelessness, food availability, policing, and so forth. So that's the kind of things that we're doing now. And my experience is students and professional engineers are highly motivated to do things to help people. By empathic involvement with the users, designers and makers are more likely to find both the right problems and the useful solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Roth. I have just a very quick question for you. So I'm a journalist, so I have to be a journalist sometimes, even during the opening of the Maker Faire. Let's try to dream big for the next year. It's been a very difficult time for optimistic people, 2020, very difficult times. Now, what's your big dream for the next year?
Well, my big dream is the world will return to normal and people won't die, of course. That's my big dream. But it's a kind of opportunity, as I said, like that little prototype I showed you for the Uganda trees. It would have never happened. In fact, we had things where with phones, we were talking to people out in the field in Africa, and they were prototyping. So actually, usually the way it was, the students worked and the user didn't get to see the final prototype until June. Now they were actually making the prototypes as we went along. So in many ways, it was a better way of working that we were forced into. So, it doesn't always work that way, and a lot of things are kind of awful, but my big hope is that people will stumble into magic things like heating their pizza cutters.
How is going to be the Christmas time in California?
I'm not getting it.
How is going to be the Christmas time now in California? How are you doing? How is life now with COVID?
Well, now it's quiet. The university the university has basically been closed. I haven't been to my office since March. The university is basically, you can go if you have a lab and you have to make experiments under certain restrictions. But in 2 days, the university is going to close until January 6th. And then they're going to bring back half the undergraduate class, which haven't been here. So far, only the graduate students have been here. And my teaching has all been in Zoom,
Sure. Are you going to make the vaccine? The vaccination? The vaccination?
I'm not getting you.
Are you going to take the vaccine? The vaccination?
No, I would like to go to Rome. I'd like to go, and even Naples. I would go that far south if you'd let me, but they won't let me go.
Okay. So maybe next year for the next Maker Faire.
My biggest dream would be to be in Naples and eat a pizza with Bruno out on the street.
Okay, homemade pizza. Thank you so much, Professor Roth. Hope to see you in Italy next year. Thank you.
Ciao Bernie. Ciao.
Allora, noi siamo un po' in ritardo, ma io ti volevo far dire una cosa al volo su di lui.
Sì, vale la pena ricordare che Bernie è autore di un bestseller che si chiama The Achievement Habit, che Stop Dreaming.
Achievement Habit,
che in italiano è stato tradotto "se vuoi, puoi".
È perfetto,
proprio l'attitudine a realizzare.
È quello che ci ha raccontato oggi, questa voglia di fare le cose. Anche se ha detto che il suo grande sogno per l'anno prossimo è tornare alla vita normale, dove ritornare un po' così prima.